as summer nears an end, school districts and parents across the nation are trying to figure out whether it's safe to send their kids back into the physical classroom. A new report finds that in the last 2 weeks of July, more than 97,000 children in the United States tested positive for COVID-19. And a majority of the infections came from states across the South and the West. Joining us right now is Annette Anderson. She is assistant professor at Johns Hopkins School of Education. She's also the deputy director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Safe and Healthy Schools and one of 3 co-founders of the eSchool Plus initiative. And Annette, what can you tell us about where things stand? I realize that this is not a nationwide answer potentially for everybody out there, but how safe is it for kids to be going back to school? What should parents be considering?
Well, I think that we've seen such a varied response across the country to how to reopen schools that there's just not consistency right now. It's really a great disruption if you will consider that some districts are going back fully remote. You have some districts that have tried to open up in a face-to-face version, and others still are talking about a hybrid version. Districts are pushing back their dates to reopen their schools in the fall. And so we're seeing all over the map just different approaches to how schools are planning to reopen right now.
Well, it's probably not a surprise, given that every elected official and every government agency seems to be kicking the can down the road, and it lands squarely on the head of each individual school district and the superintendent there to try and figure this out from a mess of conflicting advice that they've been given.
I agree. It has just been all over the place. And so as a result, what you're seeing is that parents are driving a lot of the innovation in terms of responding to these concerns. We've had so many different reports from just the federal, the state, and the local level that parents are starting to think about things like unschooling and microschooling. And we've heard a lot lately about pandemic pods as a way for parents to think about how to provide the education that they want for their children. So there's a lot of different parental insight into what they think schools should be doing right now. And schools also should be innovating. But I think that, there's a lot of conversation about how parents are driving all of the decision making, and they're voting with their feet.
Annette, I go through this as somebody who is looking to send my kids back to school and trying to figure out what's happening. I don't envy any of these superintendents who are trying to make these decisions. You have the facts on the ground changing pretty rapidly. You have advice and directives from both the state and local level changing constantly. How is a school supposed to be prepared? It's hard enough to get prepared just coming back from the summer anyway. How do you handle it on top of this? What could we be doing, I guess, both from a state, a local, and also from a national level to be assisting the schools a little more to make sure that they have what they need?
Thank you. I think that, first of all, we've got to get these community transmission rates under control. We saw just released report that said that 97,000 children across the country have been afflicted with COVID in just the last 2 weeks of July. And that's a great concern for people who are in education as they think about putting children back in physical buildings. We also know that there is some inequity as you talk about how we're going to provide internet access for all. And we think that we need to expand federal E-rate for families at home so that they can get internet access in their homes and not just in their schools and libraries, where E-rate has been a potential strong benefit. But we also know that schools are both buildings and experiences. And so we want our children to be able to use the services of our school buildings while not necessarily having to go back into unsafe situations like we saw in Georgia last week.
At the moment, are there going to be any long-term benefits from going through the experience of getting kids much more set up to be able to do some part of the schooling at home, at home and with technology? Could there be a great improvement by 2022, say, in the quality of education because of that?
I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that there will be. You're seeing, as I said earlier, that this is the great disruption. And I don't believe that we'll ever really go back to school as normal as we conceive of schooling. So I think that what you're starting to see is some innovation. There are some schools and some districts that have really thought creatively about how to approach schools. There's some that are thinking about building outside classrooms, thinking about using the environment as a source of education for students. And so I think as schools and districts continue to evolve and they're thinking about how we can be creative, we are starting to see what ed reformers have long called for: change in education and change in how our students are going to be educated for a 21st century economy. But make no mistake about it, we have to invest in our children. Even as we come out of this pandemic, we need to continue to make our greatest investment in our children because they are our economic future.